Everybody, welcome back to Change Your Perspective, Change Your Awareness, Change Your Life. Dr. Michelina AF, hashtag that Fallon Doctor, here to talk to you about people-pleasing mentality today. And people-pleasing mentality is so exhausting. What do we do in people-pleasing, right? People-pleasing mentality, we will put other people's needs and wants before our own in such a way that we're like, hey, can you go to the grocery store? And your thoughts are, no, like the last thing I want to do is go to the grocery store. I've worked all day. Like, I got to take care of the kids. Like, I got to do this. Like, no, like, can you go to the grocery store? But instead, people pleasing kicks in. We're like, yeah, of course we'll go. Like, of course I'll go. Why wouldn't I go to the grocery store? We do this all the time. It's like, instead of acknowledging that it's safe to say no to a thing, we will say yes because it's easier. Because it feels easier. Because it's less of a conflict. It's less of a hassle. It's less of a conversation to be had, right? If you say no to somebody who doesn't accept your no, now you've got to defend your no. And you're like, damn, I'd rather just say yes and not deal with it. People-pleasing mentality. People-pleasing mentality comes from not knowing your worth. It comes from your no not being accepted. It comes from your needs not being validated. So what happens in people-pleasing is that we think we only have worth or value to someone else if we do what they ask us to do. That is people-pleasing mentality all day. It's not true and it doesn't serve. This is why you have to know the difference between your who and your do. Your do, the things that you do, the things you show up and accomplish, do not make you more or less worthy of anybody's time, energy, attention, money, right? What happens when we get into high value relationship is that we know people are worthwhile because of who they are. Just because of who they are. It doesn't matter to me if my friends can or can't show up. It's irrelevant. I give them my time, energy, and attention because of who they are. And I love who they are. That's it. Right? So when you are in people pleasing, you think you're subconsciously, never consciously, but subconsciously, you think your value comes from all the things you can do. So maybe it's cooking, maybe it's buying gifts. And let that not be confused with love languages. Love languages are a way that you and somebody else in partnership can connect. It's the things that you do for each other, right? Those are the things that you want to do for them. People pleasing comes when you genuinely do not want to do the thing and you do it anyway because it's easier to say yes than it is to say no. If you people please enough, it will erode at your sense of identity because you'll just always be doing things because someone else asked you to do it. And you're never sure of what you actually want to do because of the fact that you want to do it. How do we combat people pleasing, right? Well, first you have to become aware of it. Where do you say yes when you want to say no, right? That's the first thing you have to get very good at kind of calling to mind. Is it like at your church functions? Is it where your kids are involved? Is it other parents? Is it your spouse? Is it your job? Like, where does this happen a lot? Where you're like, I would rather gouge my eyes out with a rusty spoon than do this thing, but yes, I'll do it. First, get aware. Where is that happening? With whom is that happening, right? It'll probably show up with like some person or some place more than maybe others. It means you do not feel comfortable to say no. People pleasing also has a lot to do with not being comfortable being on the spot. So you feel like, you can't say no in the moment either, right? So if you are asked to do something, a great way to start coming away from that yes right away is say, hey, you know what? I really need to think about this. Because someone else's emergency does not necessarily become your emergency. So with people pleasing, if someone's like, hey, can you like run to the store for me? I need to check my schedule. I need to think about that. It's not looking really good, but I'll let you know. Right? It's just about being very honest with what is going on. And it gets so much easier to speak our truth out when we speak it in front of people that we're comfortable with. There's a reason that, and it's not all the time, you don't want to always be saying no, but there's a reason that saying no is one of the best ways to put a barrier and a boundary up, it's because if the answer is no, the answer is no. It's not yes, it's not maybe, it's not keep asking. The answer is no. And so when we get good at that, we stop people pleasing. Because people pleasing, the very mentality, is afraid to say no to somebody because it's going to hurt their feelings, or it's going to make them upset, or it's going to do a whole slew of things, honestly. You'll see this if you had a parent that never accepted your no. I have a friend whose dad never accepts his no. So he'll be like, no, Dad, I'm not going to this thing. And his father will not accept it. Actually, neither does his mother. Neither his mother nor his father accept his no. And he has a very hard time saying it. Not to mention he doesn't like confrontation anyway. So he's constantly in people pleasing. Constantly in people pleasing. That keeps him out of his power. He's never in his authentic power, because you can't be in your authentic power if you're at everybody else's beck and call. That's not how it works. That's not how you safeguard and put boundaries up in your life. It's just not effective. People pleasing is one of those things that will absolutely erode any sense of self identity that you have, and it's always an indicator of low self-worth and being insecure. So you are a people pleaser most of the time until you're not anymore. That's kind of the way of things. And yes, we want to say yes more than no. We do want to do that, but only with people who deserve the yes. Most often, the people who are taking advantage of your people pleasing are the people that you don't want to work with anyway. That's why you want to say no to them. So say no and see what happens. And yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable, but like, change is uncomfortable, you know? So if you want to stand in your own power, here's a good rule for you to have, and it is this. Say yes when you want to say yes, and say no when you want to say no. Which sounds simple, but I promise you it is not. It is deceptively simple. It is much harder than most people think, because we've been conditioned to say yes when we want to say no. This in my own life, listen, has gotten me in so much trouble all the time. And it goes back to the fact that my no was invalidated. When I was 14, I was raped, and that rape looked a lot like him laying on top of me and continually asking me to have sex, and he told me I wasn't getting up until I said yes, even though I had said no, like, not exaggerating, 40 times, right? It was just, I was not getting up out of that position until I said yes to him. And at 14 years old, you can imagine how psychologically damaging that was. So it didn't matter that I said no 40 times, because I wasn't going to get up until I was done with that act and had told that person yes. And so for many, many years, 14 of them at least, I struggled with being a people pleaser, saying yes to people, and I thought I wasn't a people pleaser. That's the funny thing about it. I was like, I'm not a people pleaser. No, I absolutely was. Absolutely was. 100% was. 100% was. And so, and that culminated in, of course, when I was asked for a nude picture that I didn't really want to send, but sent anyway, because I was like, doesn't really matter if I do or don't want to send it. I have to send it, right? That's people-pleasing mentality 101. It doesn't really matter how I feel. I'm going to do what they ask me to do. And that almost always has like psychological roots in it. Perhaps not as sort of traumatic as my own, but still in all, things that were traumatic enough that you've internalized. Parents disregarding wishes as a child is a big one. Not being in a relationship where you are okay to say no or yes, and that's honored is another big one. There's a lot of places where no is not honored, no is not respected. And when we're people pleasing, more often than not, we are invalidating ourselves, and we're invalidating our wants, and we are invalidating our own no. Because, like, we're used to having it invalidated, so why would we even say anything other than what they want to hear, right? Wrong. No, right for people-pleasing mentality, but wrong for standing in your power. I don't like to say right and wrong, but serving and not serving. People-pleasing never serves. Never, never, never serves. Because what ends up happening is the other thing, you say yes with resentment. So this is the other thing that you can do. If you're gonna say yes, and you really don't want to, but you say yes, you had better go joyously. You better go with a joyous heart. I did that too, right? That was the worst thing I did. People be like, hey, you want to come to this event? I'm like, no, I don't. I don't want to come. But I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll come, even though I don't want to go. Now I'm resentful the whole time and I'm miserable. And this happens a lot. It's like, well, then you shouldn't have come. Don't say yes in resentment. If you have to go because you're a people pleaser, at least bring joy to the party. Which I did not do, to be perfectly honest. I've got plenty of ex-boyfriends that can attest to me doing that. Sorry, guys. So, with that being said, people-pleasing mentality is one that most people do struggle with. I would be shocked if you don't. Saying yes when you want to say no and feeling like your needs aren't important and don't matter is a big one. So, I hope this is helpful. If you're ready to take some action, check out my courses on acornsandoaks.bhx.tv. And if you like what you're hearing, subscribe, hit the bell, comment below, like the channel. And then I'll see you guys talking about codependency next time.